Welcome to the Personal Development Mastery Podcast. I'm 𝗁𝗁𝗄𝗃 and my mission is to inspire you to rise up, grow, stand out, and take action towards the next level of your life. I interview leaders, influencers, entrepreneurs, authors, exceptional people who can and will inspire you to improve your life. Tune in for 2 episodes each week and make sure you subscribe to the podcast to get the episodes as soon as they are released. In today's show, it is my real pleasure to speak with Littlehales. Nick, you are the leading elite sports sleep coach to some of the biggest names in the sporting world, including Olympic gold medalists and premiership footballers. You have been redefining sleep for over 2 decades now, and you are the founder of the R90 technique. You are passionate about sharing the sleeping secrets, techniques, and practical interventions adopted by elite athletes and coaches in the world sport. Nick, I'm delighted to have you with me today on the podcast.
My pleasure.
And I was telling you earlier, Nick, so might as well share it with the listener that I read your book about sleep 2 years ago, and I really took on board many of the practicalities that you were describing there, not only about on my sleep, but also around my sleep, before and after, which are things very important. I wanted to speak with you and help, share this very important message or knowledge, I believe. And I think, and you tell me what you believe, that many people are completely unaware of. They just take sleep for granted, that it is something we do at night. They don't give a second thought about it. And I wanted to, help share this very important knowledge. And before we dive into the sleep, can I ask you to share with me quickly, to give us some background? When did you first discover that sleep was your thing, what you wanted to really devote your life about?
Well, that could turn into a long story, but
I'd rather focus on the sleep. So just to give us a little bit of context, Nick.
I actually fell into the sleep industry. It wasn't by any choice. It was paying bills and bringing up a family. I was trying to be a sports person when I was very young. So I ended up in that industry. I gathered a lot of knowledge, worked for a very big company as a national director, went through the ranks, did lots of things, innovative stuff. And I had all of this in the background of how you've just described it. That it's an extremely important thing, a health pillar. There's no definitive approach. The only thing we would hear about is, get the room temperature to be 16 to 18 degrees and don't eat too late and get your 8 hours. But it was sort of like, well, how do dentists and nurses and doctors and pilots and, parents, how do they just ignore it?
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't really a passion. It was just, I got to a particular time in life, maybe a bit of midlife crisis, and thought, I need to go off into another industry. And it just happened at the same time that I got involved with a local football club for some other reasons. Mm-hmm. Conversations started to happen. And then I went on the little journey. And suddenly I found myself being told by the media that I'm a sleep coach in sport. And I thought, right, if that's how they see me, I better do it. And I think it's only been a sort of passion is because every sort of challenge along that route there's been a paradigm shift in behavior and technology over those 2 decades. Mm-hmm. And as all of that's been going on, it was sort of like, well, because of the lack of education, lack of awareness, it was very easy for me to just use some of these practical things that I'd learned and apply them to elite sport. And as the years went on, it became far more effective. We learned more. Mm-hmm. And I think it became even more passionate when I got involved with British Cycling and Team Sky in a strategy which is all about the aggregation of marginal gains, and they couldn't ignore sleep. And I was the only person who had a sort of practical approach to it. So I think it was that particular point that really sort of triggered it off. And I think, as you sort of we've talked about, when I was asked to write a book in 2016, I really wasn't very comfortable about doing that, but I was convinced to do it. And it's now in 16 languages. It's still being published since 2016. And I think it's just, as we've wandered into this new era, never mind sort of pandemic times, we are putting ourselves under far more pressure. And I think this, how random approach to sleep is being questioned. And technology and research allows you to find out so much more. Mm-hmm. And so I think we're finally getting to the point that, we have to try and define how we recover every day. So it's just been a sort of haphazard journey of wandering through it. It's an interesting job because I work with lots of different types of people. So, mm-hmm. And to be honest, I'm not really focused on sleep in the perception of it. It's all about, trying to get people to perform at their highest levels or create as much consistency and health and well-being. So it wasn't really a choice. That's the way it's worked out.
Maybe it chose you then, rather than you choosing it. So this book, Sleep, that you wrote, which I read and I certainly recommend, has so many. You break down really loads of elements of sleep that many of us are unaware, and I was unaware before reading it. So there are a few specific parts of it that I wanted to discuss with you out of all the wealth of information in there. And the first one I wanted to your thoughts on is the chronotype. That I remember when I read in the book for the first time, I realized what the morning person and the evening person, or the AMer and the PMer, as you say, and why I behave in a certain way and why my partner, for example, is completely the opposite. So if you would just explain briefly that for the listener to get an idea of what that is.
Well, I was aware of owls and larks, from parents and grandparents. And it's sort of like, oh, you're a morning person or an evening person, right? And so as I was working around certain professors and clinicians in sleep, I just thought, well, what is that? Is it just something we make up in our heads? And it's a little genetic twist. And basically where it comes from is human beings being outside all the time, okay, in our journey on this planet. The sun would come to rise. Mm-hmm. It would release the blue wave, energy wave in daylight. That would enter a little pineal gland in your brain that would then produce this serotonin. And the serotonin is the hormone that tells the brain to unsuppress everything, make you active, happy, appetite, bowel and bladder and everything, all your bodily functions. Mm-hmm. Now, if there's two people outside and one has this little genetic twist, i.e., a night timer and an AMer, then the AMer, like me, starts to react to that light change really quickly. Right, so it's just that serotonin production because we react to that light change. So we get early wake times, off we go, love it. But then we tend to want to go to bed earlier in the evening, right? Mm-hmm. Because we don't like the evenings. We're not comfortable in the evening. We like the mornings. Now the PMer is around a sort of phase delay of a couple of hours, right, between that process. So the AMer is like off. But the PM is not creating that serotonin as quickly. So they like later wake times. The things that I was fascinated once you find that out is, well, we live in an AMer's world, mm-hmm. right? And so the PMers are always struggling, right? Because they get forced to wake up early than they naturally want to, but they get this little second wind in the evenings. So they're quite happy to be awake at midnight or later. And then you started to see that as those couple of decades started to shift, right, is that AMers don't want to go to bed at 8 o'clock at night. They're living in a 24/7 world, but they still want to get up early. So it was kind of like when you look at any, two people together, mm-hmm. 2 a.m.ers or 2 p.m.ers tend to create conflict. So maybe partners should be a.m.ers and p.m.ers, so one helps the other and like that. But then also when you're looking inside of everyday life, all the other people around you, that if your best friend is a p.m.er and you're an a.m.er, then you want to go to the gym in the morning and do some exercise and you want to take your friend with them. But they're just going to say yes, aren't they? But they need to do something to protect themselves if they're going to do certain things too early in the day. So it's not to stop you doing it, but be aware of protecting yourself. So that's really what I think chronotypes are all about. It's just an understanding that if you had total control, you'd probably wake up at 9 o'clock in the morning. You'd probably eat breakfast at 10 o'clock in the morning. You'd probably do that in the afternoon. You'd probably do all your mentally intense stuff much later in the day. And you'd be quite happy to be active at 12, 1 o'clock at night because you're waking up at 9 o'clock in the morning. And so it's kind of, if I'm just aware of that, how many things in my day and my life actually make that more complicated for me, and can I do something about managing it better? And in sport, it's been one of the success. I can't say that word today. Success. I won't even bother. It's one of the critical factors that, the timings of games, the things that happen, the changing of schedules, and all that sort of thing. And your boss or the manager might be an AM chronotype, so they drive the whole business around their attitude towards the day. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes even in a corporate environment, Ajay, it's do you realize that over 70% of your workforce are all nighttime chronotypes, and yet everything that you do is focused on the morning? So you should be employing morning chronotypes, not nighttime chronotypes. Or you should be making sure you've got disciplines in place that helps the night timers doing morning functions. If you don't, your productivity is probably a lot lower than you think.
So it does make sense to realize, based on our chronotype, which is let's say the window in the day that we are at our best, and put some of our more productive or creative or demanding work there, rather than when we feel sluggish, and it's different for different people according.
Yes, you can like I say, it's not to try and control the world and be, but you do sort of know that if you have an occupation or a lifestyle or behavior that creates the need for you to wake up early or do things in the first phase of the day that can be challenging, then there are ways to protect yourself from that before you go into it. And that's the key. It's not just rolling into it and suddenly the outcome is you struggle sleeping, insomnia, thoughts, anxiety, and stress, because actually you've got no rhythm or you're not synchronized with any process, which is the key to sleeping.
Of course. There is another thing, Nick, that I wanted really to discuss with you, and that's what we do before we go to sleep. And that's something that not often is being discussed. So many people will say, okay, it's time for bed, and they will turn the lights off or the TV off, and go to bed or go to the toilet, brush their teeth with the bright light. And it was when I read your book that I realized these things about the blue light, the orange light. You mentioned something about candlelight, which I thought that's very lovely to use the candles in the evening. So do you want to describe some important elements of the hour before actually going to sleep? Some very important things.
It's quite simple, really. If you just wake up in the morning, and then there's only so many hours left, you're 8 hours before you've got to do it again. And you sort of like, I've got to go to sleep now. You need to understand that there is a process going on, right? And that's what you need to understand. So very, very quickly, it's a 24-hour rolling process. The sun has no relationship with human behavior or clocks or anything. It just rolls around the planet and kickstarts our day and ends our day. So what it is your post-sleep routine is your key to your everyday recovery. What you do when you first wake in the morning, which is all about light. So then you've got lots of light into midday, then you've got lots of light into sunset. And before electric light came along, then we'd be in amber light, firelight, gas light, all that sort of stuff. No blue light whatsoever. So what's happening in the final phase of your day from early evening, into sort of midnight? During that period, you are now producing melatonin because there's no blue light around. The melatonin is telling your brain to suppress everything. The sun going down changes temperature, right? So it drops. So the key thing is if you're sort of targeting, let's say, an 11 o'clock sleep time, then, at least 2 or at least 1 cycle, i.e. a 90-minute cycle, which we may touch on, but at least the hour or 2 hours walking into that period, you really have to be thinking about light to diminish, light to dark. You really must be thinking about warm to cool. And that's not being cold, but you need to be thinking about warm to cool. Yeah. You need to be thinking about bowel and bladder, right? Be careful about, what sort of things that you kind of eat within that period, whether it's a little snack, not to be hungry, or you're overhydrating with your whatever, because going into sleep's going to keep the brain active. You want to be very much try to find ways to declutter. And decluttering can improve the quality of your sleep. And what it can be is just, if you're a kind of messy person and everything's everywhere, well, as long as everything's where it's supposed to be everywhere, then that's fine. If you're a very particular person, then, so what you're doing is, it's a bit like a sort of little journey when you go into each sleep cycle. And your brain is starting to tick lots of boxes. And to take you into the deeper sleep phases, which are the most beneficial, they only get revealed between around 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., right? Not after that period. And to get into them, the brain's got to be completely comfortable, actually, coming in every single way. So it's ticking these little boxes. So the more that you can do to sort of be able to declutter your mind, to get those to-do lists out of the way, to make sure everything's in the right place and secure, just warming your body temperature up a little bit so your bedroom and bedding might be a little bit cooler. All those little factors. So you're just sort of saying, well, I've been to the toilet, or I've tried to go to the toilet, I've cleaned that out, I've done that, done that. So when the brain takes over, what you don't want to be doing is spending all the hours you're asleep, keeping you in light sleep stages, not the deeper sleep stages. So you've got an element of recovery to be active again, but you've missed out on that good stuff because it just simply won't take you down into those deeper sleep stages where, I could come into your bedroom and play with your hair and your ears, Ajay, and you wouldn't know, you wouldn't react, right? But in a light sleep, I wouldn't get through your front door. Yeah. So it's kind of, this is what it's about. It's about these 4 phases of the day. It's about post-sleep, consistent wake time, because that's what the sun's all about. A consistent start to your day, loads and loads of daylight, fuel up, bowel and bladder, little mental challenges in an unrushed way. And then you wander through your day. And when you start to get, into that early evening period, you really want to be, your main focus is being in diminished light. Right? And it's not dark, it's not active, but you've probably heard of blue blocker glasses and things like that. We use them a lot to sort of try to make sure that even while we're active in the evenings, with light around us and everything else, that being able to block out the blue light is helping that process happen in the background, right? So that's principle. Obviously, you can think about mindfulness and meditation and sounds and lots of sensory interventions that sort of helps calming, but they're all useful, but they won't put right what you've been doing since the point of wake. But those are the key things, really.
Sure. What is your opinion on those wearables that track elements of our sleep? Do they offer any substantial information we can use to change things, or is it a gimmick? Or
It's a really tricky one because in the world of sports, if you can't track it and measure it, you normally don't do it.
Sure.
But I think one of the things here is that tracking and collecting data is part of our everyday functions now, right? And it'll probably just keep being part of it. But all I can say is, as we mentioned before, that if you're starting a new journey about just the first educational process about sleep, because it's not in schools, it's just not anywhere, is it? And you sort of think, well, if you're on that little journey, so what's happened is we've got sleep trackers that are using the same sort of techniques that we use for other tracking, for exercise and stuff like that. So accelerometers and pulse and heart rate and stuff. There's some very, very good ones out there, but they are guessing. Mm-hmm. They're not taking brainwave patterns off the frontal lobe of the brain, that's how you know if you're in a clinic.
Right.
So it's kind of going, if you're not moving about much, maybe you're in deep sleep. If you are moving about, maybe you're in that one. You only got, 6.25 hours last night. Well, what are you going to do with that information?
That's my question, exactly.
How do you, if you're only getting 2% deep sleep, well, how do you put that right? Is your target 30% deep sleep? I don't know. So I think there's some very good things around it, but I think to answer your question there's no doubt that tracking sleep will become more dynamic, will become more part of life, but it has to be with knowledge, just like everything else. And we have to remember that while we track everything else, like our steps and our pulse and heart rate variability, we're tracking things when we're mentally and physically active, right? We're running, we're exercising, we're tracking things, right? Sleep is you're doing nothing. You're not in control of it. So I would always encourage people to track what they're doing from the point of wake throughout their day, of all the little key recovery points that adds up to getting it. There is already a medical term called orthosomnia for the anxiety and stress caused by people going from don't know anything, getting sleep tracking going and creating even more problems for themselves, when actually it's a perfectly natural process.
Thank you. Nick, I wanted to ask you one more question, which may be more relevant to the times that we live in at the moment. So you wrote a book back in 2016. If you would be writing it today, would you add some extra information with what's going on with the COVID and people spending more time at home? Do you think there's anything different, or is it the principles are exactly the same?
I think the principles of the technique is wandering through what I believe are the key sleep recovery indicators, 7 of them, and it's awareness, it's understanding, it's defining your 24 hours, being more synchronized with circadian rhythms. I think we tend to put a lot of emphasis on isolated solutions for sleep, like getting a new mattress or a supplement or a tracker or this, when it really is that little journey. So I don't think the principles of what's in the book is about making you aware that one thing in isolation won't really have any impact, that you can do it differently. You can have challenges and occupations that put you under pressure, and night shift workers and multi-shift workers and all that sort of stuff. And you can actually find your own way through this by using the knowledge and the technique. The pandemic period is, for some people, it's exaggerated their working schedules, and it's very demanding at the front line. There's people who've been locked in offices and not been able to get outside, locked in their homes and not been able to, So I think there's a combination of all sorts of people are going through this in different ways. But I think certainly what a large percentage of the population is probably realizing from the pandemic is that probably anyway before the pandemic we were pushing things too far, not got enough people in the workplace, or not got enough this, and not prepared for that, and not done it. There's a lot of people who probably thought working from home was a good thing, and now they don't, because there's all that sort of social interaction missing. But I think the one thing I would probably add more emphasis to is our relationship with light, diminished light and dark. Mm-hmm. And I think that little element, it's about being outside, of course, but depending on where you live on this planet, we have things like daylight saving time, which shifts the seasons and should be got rid of. So I think we find ourselves in this sort of monophasic sleeping approach. We're putting it under pressure so much. And I think the trick is, whether you're outside or inside, is getting your exposure to the right type of light at the right places. That makes you a happy, more productive person. So I'd probably emphasize that to them.
Thank you. Nick, I know that we barely scratched the surface of this fascinating topic. I want to thank you very much for all this incredible knowledge and wisdom that you shared. I would like to ask you also some quick-fire questions, more of a general nature, shall we say.
Okay.
So I always ask these questions to my guests. So the first one I always ask is, what does personal development mean to you?
It's simply just the enthusiasm to keep learning. I've always had I have a sort of bit of a risk factor in me. It probably came from my father, who was an innovative engineer and created something brand new for the world. So I think I've always been inquisitive about that sort of thing. So I don't mind getting things wrong. I don't mind going and experiencing things that don't work. Mm-hmm. So I think I always probably think that there's something else just around the corner. As long as I just keep looking and keep creating ideas to find things out, then there's always something new to learn. And that's pretty much it.
That's great. I agree completely, 100%. If you could go back in time and meet your 18-year-old self, what's the one piece of advice you would give him?
It sounds a bit sort of self-promoting, but I would have to say that if I'd had any knowledge from parents managing my formative growth years, because they've got this knowledge through the schooling and everything else, I think my choices would definitely have been maybe more considered, not wrong, more considered, or have a better perspective of it, rather than just rolling through it. Because those early years of going to school and university and relationships, the ability to recover in around that was absolutely critical when you're under all of those challenges, isn't it? Mm-hmm. How many exams did I fail because I wasn't sleeping well? I don't know. How many girlfriends or boyfriends did I not pursue because I was just too lethargic and sleep deprived? How many interviews did I miss out on? You think about all of those things, and so it has to be that. You just go back and just go. Anyway, I think that's the answer to the question, isn't it? Because you certainly know about it now, and you think, and probably everybody I consult with, because it's not just elite athletes in sports, it's corporate now, and all sorts of people in all different walks of life, like dentists and doctors, coming to me trying to, help them through their little journeys, and frontline workers and fire service people and police forces, politicians, all come knocking on that sort of book door going, can you find my little way? And every single one of them, without question, I can ask you that question, Reggie. If you'd read my book, that book, when you were 18, do you think you could have had some, not necessarily, but it certainly would have been a good stuff to have in your back pocket.
Oh my, yes. There is a list of books, Nick. If I could mail them back in time to my 18-year-old self, they would make a very different life. I know. Let me ask another, then a quick hypothetical question. If you could wave a magic wand and change something in the world today, as it is today, I mean, what would you change?
Wow, what a question. I don't know whether I'm qualified to ask that sort of question because there's something going on in my head. But I think just more empathy for others. I don't really know what that means, but I think it's about caring. It's about relationships. About we're all human beings. It's about, you could easily make that sort of, stop global warming or, nobody's in poverty all over the planet. They're all sort of wonderful things, that there. But I think we're all in a massive social experiment, aren't we? Whatever age group we're in, and there's so much going on in our worlds with communication and technology and shifts and changes that I think we all have to maybe sort of get back to some of these basic principles that we're just human beings with bodily functions, sun going around the planet. And the more we're connected with that process and plant-based foods and looking after yourself, and I think, so I don't know whether that is the right word, Naji, empathy for others or caring for others, but I think we've certainly lost the plot.
I think if we sorted that empathy between us, then everything else would be very easy to fix. It would follow rather than as a result of that by, looking after each other. Nick, emerging from all this conversation we had today, if you were to give to the listener one actionable item, something they can implement straight away tonight, hopefully when they go to bed, what's the one advice you would give them? One item. Hopefully they picked more than one in this short conversation.
It's kind of like a little bit of a complicated answer, but the principle is to start the process is to, yes, you can tap circadian rhythms in your browser and understand what I've been talking about. Mm-hmm. You can take notice of your chronotype now. Everybody knows what it is. You can camouflage it or override it. I think the bit that makes the difference is this is a 24-hour rolling process. So what you want to do is, if you had complete control over your day, what would be your most natural wake time? Okay? Roughly. If that's the same as your occupational wake time, fine.
That's great. Yeah.
If it's not, then it's going to be earlier. So use your most consistent start of day time, let's say 6:30. Mm-hmm. Chop your day up into 90-minute cycles, which creates 16 timings. You've got 4 phases of that process, morning into midday, into early evening, into night and back again. And once you've got those timings in place, so my sleep routine works around 11 into 6:30, which is 5 90-minute cycles from 11 to there, but it creates little timings like 11 into 12:30, 12:30 into 2, into 3:30, and into 6:30. It then gives me the first 90-minute cycle of my day between 6:30 and 8. Mm-hmm. And that's where I do all that post stuff. And then every 90 minutes, I think of a little recovery break. Just point the brain in a different direction for a couple of minutes. Get near a window just for a couple of minutes. It makes all of this work. And then you get that sort of, when do I start doing that? When do I start doing that? And then you can start to be really clever. And so because I'm an AMer and I don't want to be rushing around in the evening trying to go to bed early in this wonderful world, then I just shifted it to 4 cycles. So not between 11 and 6:30, shifted it to 12:30, which is the next cycle along. So it's 4 cycles in 6 hours, but sleep all the way through. Do all of these lovely little things. And then I slot in a 30-minute little micro cycle, a nap, a controlled recovery period, late afternoon. And I'm not even trying to sleep, just some vacant mind space, just for me, for 30 minutes. And if I do that, then it takes all the pressure off my evening. It means I'm going to sleep later, but it's far more productive. It means I've got more time to declutter, to get the emails done, to eat healthily, not to have too much going on, panicking about everything. And basically, then I've found a different rhythm. So the answer to the question is, what's your most consistent wake time? Make it that every day, because that's what the sun is about. Chop your day up into 90-minute cycles, create those little timings, then get on with it, and you'll find your flow.
That's fantastic. I got something personally from that, what you said about the vacant mind space. It's an amazing way to describe it, not even trying to sleep, because I've done it and I feel refreshed even without sleeping necessarily, or I might sleep like 5-10 minutes.
The point is, what I was always fascinated about is how can a human being fall asleep behind the wheel of a car or a motorway?
Yeah.
Because we see that all over the UK, everywhere. Yeah. Tiredness can kill you. And you just go, why would you choose to fall asleep in such a fatal, dangerous situation?
Yeah.
And it's basically because in a certain part of the day, because of this polyphasic sleeping approach that humans have always done, not just one block. And you've got midday, and you've got early evening, and you've got multiphasic, triphasic approaches to sleep before we go to that. So when it's sort of like, so what your brain is actually doing is just taking over, because visualization, sounds, what you're doing, right place, and it completely ignores the fact that you could die. You kind of go, so what is it? It's not napping, snoozers for losers. It's a controlled recovery period, because if I sort of just create them in my day, when I'm not even trying to sleep, my brain will just do it anyway. So if I just give it a moment to look at something really pleasant, down by the river or the coast or a visual or outside the window, or just a little tiny couple of minutes, it will take advantage of that. I don't have to just create it. If I have 30 minutes late afternoon and it just decides like you're going to microsleep yourself, you'll start to feel it before you even get there. So I can actually CRP anywhere, standing up, doing this, doing that. And I think that's the real critical little balance is, sleep was for a past generation of just doing it without taking it for granted and trying to get it up. No, not today. It's a redefined mental and physical recovery approach. It's about being human. It's about brain and bodily functions. It's about recovery as an active success factor of being successful, not just doing nothing.
I like the word recovery very much, very appropriate. Nick, what is the best way for people to find out more about you? Where do you normally direct them?
Like most things, the 𝗁𝗶𝗄𝗆𝐻.com is our website. There's our social media platforms on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. We are constantly producing loads and loads of free content wherever you want to look at it. There's lots of videos on YouTube about things that I've done and things like that. There's little coaching service, audible courses, the book you mentioned, or you can listen to the book if you don't like reading. But that's the best place to go. And then you can go on your own little journey as to whether you're going to get yourself inspired by reading the book or listening to it, or do that little course, or do that, or maybe even a one-to-one consultation, or just follow us on Twitter, or read the blogs, read the videos. And I think, if you're not inspired, then to realize that there's probably a smarter, more productive you out there. You just need to get out of the shadow of taking this for granted.
Fantastic. Absolutely, 100%. I want to thank you very much for your time today, for sharing your extensive knowledge and expertise on this matter. I know we only scratched the surface, but I hope we gave to the listeners some intriguing information and some actionable items. Thank you again. Any last parting words?
Thank you very much for having me on. We can always jump on again one day if any of your listeners say, "Oh, can we just dive into that subject?" Whatever it is. But it's a strange old title, Elite Sports Sleep Coach.
It's very unique.
There's lots of people diving into the world of sleep, but it's sort of like this is what the world's all about. You know, 1 minute you haven't got this, and then you got that. And I think, as we're in that particular world of almost instant, constant change, algorithms actually telling us what to do rather than we're actually making any choices, and all that stuff going on, you really need to reflect on being a human being, and obviously, you know, eating and drinking, a bit of exercise. Now it's time for sleep, and you just need to redefine it in the modern world, and you'll be fine. So, the people who are stepping out, and I think the last thing anybody would want to do is waste valuable time sleeping without benefits. I mean, what's the point of that? You know, I just find that fascinating. Why would I want to allocate all this time? You know, 30% of my life, and I haven't even got an approach to try and make it work the best way. I just try to fall asleep every night and wake up in the morning. That is not good use of valuable, once-in-a-lifetime life space, is it?
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and rate it on Apple Podcasts, and also share this episode with someone who you think will benefit from it. If you want to find out more about what I do and gain access to exclusive content, join my Facebook group Personal Development Mastery. The link is in the show notes, or you can simply type bit.ly/PDM group. And until next time, stand out, don't fit in,